and welcome to this Astranti YouTube video. In this video I'm going to be looking at 8 key ways in which you can save time in your case study exam. And it doesn't matter whether you're sitting the operational, the management or the strategic case study, all of these tips can be used. And this is a smaller version of what I go into in a lot more detail in the masterclasses and also in our exam technique packs. So if you are interested in learning more about those, then please do visit the website www.astranti.com. And if you like this video and you'd like to see more of the sorts of videos we're going to be putting up about exam technique and theory, etc., then please like and subscribe at the bottom of the screen. So let's get into the topic, how to save time in your exam. This is a real problem that a lot of students have with the case study exam. It's a very time-pressured exam and time management is key. But we're all human and often things will take longer than we expect and we might end up running out of time. So it's important to have some tips in your back pocket, so to speak, to use when you are having issues with time management. But before I go into any more detail, just to let you know, shortcuts can lose you marks. These should not be the tips that you're implementing from the word go in your exam. These are the plan Bs when you've ran out of time and you can't plan your answers properly, you can't write your full developed answers properly. It's not your go-to. So remember that these can lose you marks if you were to attempt the whole exam using these tips. So only use them when you are having issues with your time management. So let's take a look at these tips now. Starting with number 1 is to be really concise. You should be avoiding waffling anyway, but this means it being really concise when you're not developing your points to quite the extent that you would have been in the past. So perhaps using shorter paragraphs, only 1 to 1.5 lines per point rather than 2 lines per point. So you're not getting as much detail. Your evaluation might be a bit less, but you're still getting the specific point across. So let's take a look at what this might look like, how we could cut the following paragraph down. So we can see it's quite long. Consideration for the takeover proposal is the challenge of raising the funds, and we've got X amount of cash available in the business, but it's going to cost us this amount, etc. So it's very long. Now it's a very excellent paragraph, and that will definitely get you some marks in the exam, but it's very long-winded and it brings in a lot of different bits of information from the unseen, from the pre-seen, from your general knowledge, etc. So we could write it a lot more quickly, a lot more succinctly. It may not get us as many marks, but it may at least allow us to quickly get some marks for the same point. So instead, what you might do is just pick out one clear point, explain it as quickly as possible, and just add in some extra value. Perhaps just throw in one reference to the unseen rather than a reference to the unseen and a reference to the pre-seen, etc. So what it might look like is giving an example from the pre-seen and applying it to the specific scenario, and explain why and why not it is an issue, rather than launching into a full explanation as we did in the first one. So it might look like this. Funding the takeover will be a challenge. With the requirement and the money that we actually have, it could be quite difficult to raise additional funding. So you can see it's a lot briefer. It ultimately says the same thing. It doesn't explain it and evaluate it quite as much, and it doesn't evaluate the more specific levels of the question, the requirement, but it gets to the point still. It does make a clear point. Now, it might not get you as much points as the longer paragraph, but you'll probably be able to write more of these quickly back to back than you would be able to write that longer paragraph. So if you are struggling for time and you've still got a few points you want to make, this might be a more efficient approach with the time that you have left. Then tip number 2, never look back at the pre-seen. Every time you click on the little pre-seen logo and look through the pre-seen in the exam, it's costing you time. So what you should do in advance of this is create a 1-page fact sheet of all the points that you want to bring up or that you think you might bring up memorize that, and never look at the pre-scene during the exam because it's just going to waste your time. Tip number 3, don't revisit the unseen material. So skim read the material to identify your requirements, read it in a bit more detail once you've identified the requirements to create your plan, and you of course should be building an initial structure around those requirements that you've identified. But once you've done that, don't look back at it again. Don't look for some points to bring up from the unseen. Don't look for some specific bits in the reference material because, again, as with the pre-scene, you're just going to be wasting your time. You're just going to be spending time that could be spent writing, which, when you are pushed for time, is really important. You don't want to spend time wasting looking through material. Trust your plan. It was okay when you initially drew it up. Just go with it. Don't worry about overthinking it and making changes now. Tip number 4, work at a really high pace. You'll have to work at a high pace anyway, but what I mean by this is to really just go for it. Almost just be typing without even thinking about what you're writing. You should be thinking about it, but not constantly looking through what you've just written and thinking, could I reword that sentence? Could I change it around? Because that's going to be wasting your time. You have to get as much down on paper as possible. There are no marks for blank screens. So make sure you write as much down. Do not worry too much about how eloquently you've written your answer. Don't think about your spelling and your grammar and could you use a better word there, etc. It is an English exam that is sat all around the world. So CIMA have specifically said there'll be no marks for spelling and grammar because that would provide an unfair advantage to native English speakers, an unfair disadvantage to people who do not speak English as a first language. So do not worry too much about that. Another way in which you can improve how quickly you write, and it may sound strange, but it does work, is to do something to get yourself energized. Go for a walk, go for a run, go for a cycle for 10, 15, 20 minutes before your exam is set to start. Gets all your blood pumping, your adrenaline going, and it will help you to write more effectively. We've had students before that have said that by doing that, they were able to get 100 plus words more out in each question, which could be the difference between 30 marks and 33 marks, or a pass mark and not a pass mark. So it can make all the difference. Tip number 5, if you feel that you are a slow typer, try to improve your typing speed before the exam. Now, I'm not saying that you're going to go from being a slow typer to being a computer programmer, but just doing something to improve your typing speed by a couple of words per minute will help. Now, you actually only need to average around about 20 words per minute in the exam. I think you should be writing more than that, but in general, you can pass this exam with about, if you're looking at, say, the strategic case study level, 900 words per question, which is 2,700 words for the exam. And by the time you factor in the planning time, that's only 20 words per minute. But it does mean 20 words per minute every single minute. No minutes of looking at the pre-scene, etc. Every time you do that, you're upping the words per minute you need to write. But as most people type more quickly than 20 words per minute, it shouldn't be too difficult. But you can find typing tests online. There are many different typing speed tests that are really good at helping you just to get a couple extra words per minute out. And so what's really useful about that is you can do it quite quickly. Of course, it's going to take a long time if you want to get really, really fast, but it might only take an afternoon just to get your typing speed up by a couple of minutes because it's very specific tests that actively try to make you type faster rather than just thinking that your typing speed will come over time. So if you do have time before the exam, just an afternoon working on your typing speed could be all the difference. If you just were able to write a couple more words per minute, that might translate into a couple more paragraphs per question and a couple more marks per question. Over the course of 3-4 questions, that could be 6, 7, 8 marks that were earned just simply by improving your typing speed. So very important. Tip number 6, don't overthink things. Just glance at your plan. You were happy with the plan when you initially drew it up. Don't think about your plan. Don't change your plan and change it around, etc. Just type Just keep turning your planner into your answer. And you should be spending 90% of your time outside of the planning time, obviously, typing. So that's an idea of how much time you should be spending actually typing. If you find you're sitting around and thinking half the time, then you're thinking too much and you need to stop overthinking and keep typing. Tip number 7 is that when you've only got a few minutes left, use one-line bullet points. Now, before I explain how to use one-line bullet points, just like to say that this is the absolute worst case scenario. If properly planning and properly writing your answer using lots of different writing rules that we also discuss in our exam technique guide, etc., is plan A, and a lot of the things here in the time saving section are plan B. This would be a plan C. This is the absolute, you are only halfway through the question, you've only got a couple minutes left. You need to squeeze out as many marks as possible. So, what should we do if we've got 5 minutes left and we need to start using one-line bullet points? Well, they should be no longer than one line of the Pearson-VUE system, and they should be very brief points, a very brief explanation and application. May not get you a full mark, and it's certainly not going to get you the marks that a full paragraph would, but you might be able to fire these out very, very quickly and just turn some of the points that you brought out in your plans into sentences just to demonstrate to the examiner that you've got something down, that you were heading somewhere. So, for example, got another paragraph here about communication tools, and it's a very nicely written paragraph and talking about performance and feedback and how this has an impact on staff knowledge and awareness and it meets the business's needs. It's very nice and it links back to everything to do with the business. But you could instead say, individually focused feedback can be provided to focus their work on personal and business goals. That's a very quick way of saying the same thing. It's not as much detail, it doesn't bring in the overall business needs, etc., but it ultimately still perhaps says the gist of it. Another one here, appraisals provide a forum for staff members to communicate with managers and discuss concerns, etc. Having this forum facilitates motivation, can overcome performance problems, etc. So again, we're linking in information from the material, the unseen, etc., and we're developing our answer fully. But again, if we're really pressed for time, we can't spend our time writing that. So instead, we might say, staff provide feedback to managers which facilitates motivation and allows issues to be aired and resolved. Again, ultimately saying the same thing, not in as much detail, in as much depth, but it's ultimately still got the gist of it. So that's something to do if you are really pushed for time. Point, explain, add value, rather than developing your full paragraph. Now, you will get fewer marks for this, but you might be able to fire off lots of these points more quickly. And as a result, the most efficient use of your time might be to do that. You might actually gain more marks than trying to plow on writing your full, rounded, developed paragraphs. And finally, tip number 8, make the easy, obvious points first. Don't focus on the complex points. And this somewhat links to what you may have been taught during your objective test exams. And those of you who are preparing for the case study exam, or you're thinking you will do them in the future, but you're still on your objective tests, you're probably aware that one of the approaches that you can use is to go through and answer all the questions you can easily get straight away, then go back and look at the ones that you couldn't answer straight away. Because it's good to get the marks in the bank, so you're not pushed for time, you're not a few minutes left, and you still got 10 questions to go, and you have to miss them out when there definitely would have been ones you could have answered. And it's the same thing for the case study, particularly now that it is on a computer and you have your plan all drawn out. If you've got a list of 20 points that you need to bring up in your answer, if you identify 5, 6, 7, that you could turn those into a decent paragraph in 30 seconds, no problem, without breaking a sweat, by all means do that. Don't write a couple that are easy and then you get to a complex one. You spend 5 minutes trying to write a paragraph about it and then 5 minutes trying to write a paragraph about another difficult point. And at the end of the day, you get to the time limits and you look down the points you're yet to bring. Oh, I could definitely have made a point about that. I could definitely have made a point about that. So go through and get the easy marks first, because in the case study exam, A paragraph is worth a point, whether it's a difficult point, whether it's an easy point, etc. So go through, get all those easy points, and then go back and write the more difficult points afterwards. So thank you for watching this short video on 8 steps to save time in the case study exam. As I mentioned before, if you are interested in tips like this, then please like and subscribe. And if you would like to learn more about exam technique, then please visit the Astranti website, www.astranti.com, for more information on the exam technique series that we produce, which has a study text and a series of videos, etc. And also the masterclasses, which are all-day classes which talk about exam technique and also how to approach questions and develop your answers to questions. So thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.